From the outside, Daniel and Clary looked like a dream. He was the polished businessman whose handshakes commanded respect in boardrooms. She was the woman who carried grace like an heirloom, her smile softening even the hardest gazes. To neighbors and friends, they were the couple who had it all: wealth, beauty, stability. But perfection has shadows. At dinner that night, the dining room was bathed in candlelight. The table was set immaculately, silverware aligned, wine glasses gleaming. Yet the silence between them stretched long and suffocating, broken only by the clink of cutlery against porcelain. Daniel forced a smile. Smile, and she won't ask questions, he told himself. His eyes followed her hand as it brushed the stem of the glass, delicate yet unsettling in its calmness. "You're quiet tonight," Clary finally said, her voice carrying both curiosity and doubt. "I'm just tired. Long day." His words were clipped, rehearsed. She nodded, but the way her gaze lingered told him she wasn't convinced. She knew. She always knew when something was wrong. And beneath the mask he wore, Daniel's thoughts twisted. How much longer can I keep this act alive? The world saw a perfect marriage. Behind closed doors, two souls drifted apart, the air thick with resentment and silence. Tomorrow, Clary would notice the late nights. Tomorrow, she would hear the phone calls. Tomorrow, the first crack would show, and once it began, nothing would stop the fracture from spreading. From the outside, Daniel and Clary looked like a dream. He was the polished businessman whose handshakes commanded respect in boardrooms. She was the woman who carried grace like an heirloom, her smile softening even the hardest gazes. To neighbors and friends, they were the couple who had it all: wealth, beauty, stability, but perfection has shadows. At dinner that night, the dining room was bathed in candlelight. The table was set immaculately, silverware aligned, wine glasses gleaming. Yet the silence between them stretched long and suffocating, broken only by the clink of cutlery against porcelain. Daniel forced a smile. Smile, and she won't ask questions, he told himself. His eyes followed her hand as it brushed the stem of the glass, delicate yet unsettling in its calmness. "You're quiet tonight," Clary finally said, her voice carrying both curiosity and doubt. "I'm just tired. Long day." His words were clipped, rehearsed. She nodded, but the way her gaze lingered told him she wasn't convinced. She knew. She always knew when something was wrong. And beneath the mask he wore, Daniel's thoughts twisted. How much longer can I keep this act alive? The world saw a perfect marriage. Behind closed doors, two souls drifted apart, the air thick with resentment and silence. Tomorrow, Clary would notice the late nights. Tomorrow, she would hear the phone calls. Tomorrow, the first crack would show, and once it began, nothing would stop the fracture from spreading. The silence of that dinner lingered into the following days, unspoken words hanging like smoke in the air. Clary tried to dismiss it, telling herself fatigue explained Daniel's distance. But as nights stretched longer, her unease deepened. Began coming home late, his excuses polished yet hollow: board meetings, traffic, a sudden client call. Always something just believable enough, but always followed by the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers. Clary lay awake, listening to the muffled vibration of his phone in the next room. One night, when he stepped out onto the balcony, she reached for it. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the screen, only to find it locked. Still, the ache in her chest told her the truth was behind that passcode. Couldn't sleep? Daniel's voice cut through the quiet. He stood in the doorway, shadow stretching across the floor, his expression unreadable. She forced a smile, clutching the phone tightly before placing it back on the table. Just restless. He studied her a moment too long before nodding. You worry too much. By day, he was the perfect husband. At gatherings, his hand rested on the small of her back, his laughter warm and effortless. Friends admired their bond, envied their chemistry. To them, Daniel was attentive, devoted. But when the curtains closed, the mask slipped. His silences grew colder, his touches more mechanical. And Clary, caught between love and dread, began to keep her own secrets. Small notes scribbled in, A hidden journal, late-night whispers to herself, trying to stitch reason into fear. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe in them. But trust once cracked becomes glass beneath the feet, each step threatening to cut deeper. That night, as she lay in bed listening to his shallow breathing, a single thought haunted her. If he is hiding something, how far would he go to keep it hidden? Her question would soon find an answer, and the answer would shatter everything she thought she knew about her marriage. The questions Clary whispered to herself began to take shape in the cruelest of answers. One evening, as she cleared the laundry basket, a crumpled receipt slipped from Daniel's jacket pocket. A dinner for two, expensive wine, charged on a night he'd sworn he was working late. Her heart pounded as she pieced the fragments together. The perfume, the silences, the locked phone. Shadows had names now, and one of them wasn't hers. Later that night, she watched him through the crack of the bedroom door. His face glowed, faintly in the light of his phone, lips curving into a smile she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "Who is she, Daniel?" Her voice broke the silence, sharper than she intended. He froze, thumb hovering over the screen before slipping it into his pocket. "What are you talking about?" "You come home late. You smell like her perfume. Do you think I don't notice?" Her words trembled between accusation and desperation. Daniel exhaled, walking toward the mirror, his reflection fractured in the half-light. "Clary, you're imagining things again. You've been so stressed, maybe you need rest." "Don't do that," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Don't make me doubt myself." But that was his weapon. He stepped closer, voice soft, practiced. "I love you. Everything I do for us. You're the only woman in my life." Her chest tightened, torn between clinging to his words and drowning in the silence beneath them. He pressed a hand to her cheek, tender yet suffocating, and kissed her forehead as though sealing a lie. Yet when she turned away, Daniel's eyes flickered back to his phone, the corners of his lips twitching with a secret he refused to surrender. Clary wept quietly into her pillow, believing half his words and fearing the other half. But Daniel? He was already imagining a future where she no longer existed at all, and that thought, dark and intoxicating, had only just begun to take root. Daniel lay awake beside Clary, her soft breathing steady, her tears long since dried into the pillow. He stared at the ceiling, his mind refusing rest. Divorce was the obvious option, but divorce meant ruin. Half his fortune gone, his reputation shattered, whispers in the boardroom. He could already hear them. The man who lost everything to his wife. The thought tightened around his pride like a noose. No, not me. Never me. He rose quietly, padding into his study. The lamp's glow fell over a framed family photograph. Him and Clary, smiling at some long-forgotten vacation. But as he leaned closer, his reflection in the glass warped the image. His eyes dark, his mouth twisted. For the first time, he didn't see a wife beside him. He saw an obstacle, a clean solution began to form in his mind, chilling in its simplicity. If Clary were gone, there would be no divorce, no scandal, no division of assets, only freedom. The thought startled him, but it did not repel him. In fact, it soothed him. The following evening, as he stood alone on a bridge, the river churning, black below, he let the fantasy expand. An accident, a fall. Who would question it? His silhouette blended with the shadows, a man consumed by possibilities darker than night. Back home, Clary noticed the shift. His touches were softer, his tone almost tender. Yet something inside her recoiled. It was as though he were rehearsing a role, a version of himself that didn't quite fit. Daniel smiled at her across the dinner table, the mask firmly in place. But behind the smile, a single conviction now burned steady. She could never leave him, not alive. Daniel's new tenderness unsettled Clary more than his coldness ever had. Flowers appeared on the kitchen counter, his voice softened, and yet his eyes, always his eyes, betrayed something rehearsed, something off. When she suggested inviting her friend Sarah over for dinner, he smiled thinly. Why? Don't you think it's better if we focus on us? I just miss her, Clary replied. His hand rested on her shoulder, gentle but firm. Lately you've been anxious. People will start thinking something's wrong. Do you want that? Her throat tightened. He wasn't forbidding her outright, but the seed of doubt was planted. Slowly, she stopped reaching out. Calls went unanswered, visits postponed. At night, she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, mascara smudged from quiet tears. Maybe it's me, she whispered, voice trembling. Maybe I'm imagining everything. Daniel appeared. In the doorway, his shadow stretching across the tiles. He stepped closer, slipping his hand onto her shoulder, his smile sharp as a knife. See, you're just tired. I know what's best for you. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Though her chest screamed with unease, each day became a performance under his direction. He told her what to wear, reminded her of things she hadn't forgotten, questioned her memory when she resisted. Piece by piece, he chipped away at her certainty until even her own thoughts seemed suspect. And Daniel thrived in her confusion. The weaker she became, the stronger his conviction grew. Soon, he promised himself, she would be gone, and no one would ever know the truth. Daniel's mask of tenderness had done its work. Clary, fragile and doubting herself, no longer posed a threat to his control. With her weakened, he allowed his mind to turn fully to the solution. Nights that once belonged to sleep became hours spent at his desk. The glow of his computer screen lit his face in harsh tones, searches filling the history with phrases like accidental death insurance payout and painless poisons undetectable. On a notepad beside him, sketches took form, arrows pointing to bottles of pills, scribbled ideas for slip in the bathroom or tragic car accident. Words were crossed out violently, others underlined with precision. His life had become a blueprint for murder. The next afternoon, he met her, the other woman, the one who whispered freedom into his ear. They sat in a quiet cafe, her hand brushing his across the table. You can't keep living like this, she said, her voice low, urgent. She makes you miserable. Don't you want to be free? Daniel sipped his coffee, eyes cold, calculating. Freedom comes with a cost, but some costs are worth paying. She smiled, mistaking his menace for longing. When it's just us, everything will be better. I promise. Her faith in him was blind, almost intoxicating. She didn't see the hunger in his gaze, not for love, but for release, for the power to end what bound him. At home, Clary noticed the scraps of paper he burned in the fireplace, the tension he carried in his jaw. But when she asked, he laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Work stress, that's all. Yet the truth was written in ash and glowing screens. Daniel was no longer thinking about if, he was planning when. Daniel's newfound kindness unsettled Clary more with each passing day. He brought her tea in the mornings, asked about her sleep, even lingered at the dinner table as if savoring their time together. To anyone else, it would have seemed romantic, but to Aisha, it felt scripted, every word a line from a play he'd already rehearsed. When she caught his gaze, it wasn't warmth she saw. 'Twas calculation, a sharpness like a knife hidden behind a smile. At night, unease gnawed at her chest. The house, once a sanctuary, pressed in around her with suffocating silence. She woke from dreams of drowning, gasping for breath, and sometimes found Daniel watching her, his face unreadable in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. One afternoon, unable to bear the weight of her own fears, Clary sought out her closest friend, Sarah. They sat together in Sarah's living room, shadows stretching across the floor as the sun dipped low. Clary's tears soaked Sarah's shoulder. Something's wrong, Clary whispered. I can't explain it, but I feel like he's hiding something from me. He's different. Sarah held her tighter. Clary, if you don't feel safe, you need to tell someone. Don't ignore your instincts. I don't even know if it's real, Clary confessed, shaking. Maybe I'm just losing myself. Sarah pulled back, meeting her eyes firmly. No, you're not crazy. Don't let anyone make you believe that. Neither noticed the figure at the window across the street. Daniel, having followed her, stood half-hidden, his gaze fixed on the sight of his wife clinging to another. His jaw tightened, his face a mask of calm, but inside, a storm raged. The game was shifting, and he would not allow anyone to interfere. The night Daniel had imagined for weeks finally arrived. Every detail had been rehearsed in his mind until it felt less like a crime and more like destiny. The wine was uncorked, the dinner table set, the candles flickering low. Clary, though weary from days of doubt, tried to believe his sudden attentiveness was real. "Just us tonight," he said, pouring a generous glass of red. His tone was smooth, but his hand lingered a beat too long on the bottle, steadying himself. Clary forced a smile, lifting her glass. The stem trembled between her fingers. Daniel watched closely as she sipped. Time slowed, the ticking clock on the wall loud, enough to feel in his chest. Midnight crept closer, the hour he had chosen, the moment where one life would end and another would begin. But fate is rarely so obedient. Across the street, a neighbor watering plants on her balcony lingered longer than usual, glancing curiously toward their lit window. Daniel noticed, his jaw tightening, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. Then, just as he urged Clary to finish her drink, the phone rang. A sharp, piercing sound that shattered the fragile illusion of control. Clary rose instinctively. "It could be Sarah." "No!" His voice cracked, too forceful. He quickly softened it, smiling. "Stay, I'll answer." He snatched the receiver, murmuring reassurances to the caller, but inside his pulse hammered. Every second stretched the distance between plan and execution. When he returned, Clary's wineglass lay tipped over, deep red spilling across the tablecloth like blood. She laughed nervously, dabbing at it with a napkin. "Clumsy me," she said. Daniel's smile faltered. His perfect night was unraveling, strand by strand, and as the clock struck midnight, he realized control was slipping from his hands, and that survival, for both of them, might hinge on what happened next. The night that was meant to end in silence erupted into chaos. Clary collapsed, her body weak but not lifeless. Panic, real or performed, spread across Daniel's face as he dialed for help, his voice trembling with urgency. At the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed above as doctors fought to stabilize her. Machines beeped steadily, tubes snaked. Around her fragile body, pale but breathing, she clung to life by a thread. Daniel sat by her bedside, his hand resting gently over hers, his expression carved in sorrow for anyone watching. To the nurses, he was the picture of a devoted husband. But beneath the performance, his mind raced. How did it fail? Where did the plan slip? When the detectives arrived, his charm went to work. He stood, shook their hands warmly, his smile wide, enough to disarm suspicion. "She fainted," he explained smoothly. "Stress, exhaustion, she hasn't been herself lately. I've been so worried." The detectives nodded politely, but one lingered on the way. His eyes shifted, calculating every word. Later, when they were alone, Clary stirred. Her lips parted, a faint whisper escaping. "It wasn't an accident." The detective leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. "Daniel, he's hiding something." The words slipped out like a prayer, fragile but determined. Daniel entered moments later, smile polished, carrying a bouquet of flowers too bright for the sterile room. "My love," he said softly, brushing her hair back. "I was so scared." The detectives watched, their expressions unreadable. But the seed had been planted. Tiny cracks had begun to spread across Daniel's flawless mask. And once cracks appear, it's only a matter of time before the entire facade collapses. The detectives left the hospital with more questions than answers. Clary's frail words echoed in their minds. It wasn't an accident. They began digging. What they found was a marriage that looked flawless only from a distance. Friends spoke of Daniel's charm in public but remembered Clary's silences, her withdrawn smile. Relatives recalled arguments whispered behind closed doors, A pattern of control, subtle but undeniable, began to take shape. In the station, a board filled, quickly with photographs, scribbled notes, and timelines. At the center, Daniel, smiling confidently in every image. Then came the digital trail, search histories about poisons, staged accidents, life insurance policies. Enough to suggest intent, not yet enough to convict. But the cracks widened. Meanwhile, the other woman was unraveling. Alone in her apartment, she clutched her phone, tears streaking her face. Daniel's messages, once intoxicating, now felt like chains. "Trust me, soon it will be just us," he had written. But now, with police circling, fear seeped into her veins. When detectives finally approached her, her composure fractured. "I didn't know," she sobbed, hands trembling. "I thought he just wanted to leave her. I didn't know he was planning." Her voice broke, guilt consuming her. The more they uncovered, the more Daniel's carefully woven image began to fray. Yet in every interview, every public appearance, he remained poised, smiling, certain he could outwit them all. But the net was tightening, strand by strand, and Daniel, though he could not see it yet, was already trapped inside. Daniel sensed the walls closing in. Whispers of investigation reached him, and his lover's distance became impossible to ignore. She no longer answered his late-night calls with excitement. Now her voice was clipped, anxious, trembling. He cornered her, one evening in her apartment, the blinds drawn tight. "You're not going to betray me," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Because if I go down, you go with me." She flinched, backing against the wall. "Daniel, I never wanted this. I thought you just wanted out, not murder." He stepped closer, eyes cold, a shadow stretching across her trembling frame. "You'll keep quiet or you'll regret it." The threat clung to the air long after he left, and it broke something inside her. For nights she couldn't sleep, replaying his words, the weight of Clary's pale face in the hospital bed pressing against her conscience. When the detectives finally called her in, she crumbled. In the sterile interrogation room, under the harsh light, she broke down completely. Tears blurred her vision as words tumbled out between sobs. "He planned it. He told me everything. The wine, the accidents even how he'd explain it away." Behind the two-way mirror, Daniel's reflection appeared calm, almost detached, as if watching a scene he had already anticipated. But outside the glass, the detectives knew. Her confession was the missing piece. The mask Daniel had worn so carefully was finally cracking beyond repair. And the next step would take place under the blinding lights of a courtroom, where lies could no longer shield him from judgment. Courtroom was packed, the air heavy with whispers and tension. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicked outside, and the trial of Daniel Kahn became a spectacle that gripped the entire city. To the public, he was no longer the charming businessman. He was the husband who had turned love into a weapon. Clary sat at the witness stand, her hands trembling, her voice breaking but steady enough to pierce the silence. "I trusted him with my life, and he tried to take it away." The scars on her face, faint but visible, seemed to echo every word. Across the room, Daniel sat in his suit, posture flawless, his expression unreadable. His eyes never left her, as though she were still the woman he controlled in silence. But here, in this arena of justice, she had taken her power back. When his lover took the stand, the tension deepened. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she recounted the whispered promises, the chilling threats, the night he cornered her. "He told me if I spoke I'd regret it, but I couldn't live with the truth buried inside me." Her words cracked the last piece of Daniel's carefully built armor. The prosecution laid bare his search histories, his scribbled notes, the insurance policies that gleamed like nails in a coffin. The defense tried to paint him as a misunderstood man, pushed but the narrative had already unraveled. In his final address, Daniel spoke at last. Calm, almost rehearsed, he declared, "I loved her, but love can be a prison. I only wanted to be free." His words, meant to evoke sympathy, instead revealed the cold selfishness at his core. The verdict was swift: guilty, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. As the gavel fell, a ripple moved through the courtroom. Relief, sorrow, disbelief. Clary closed her eyes, exhaling as though for the first time in years. Justice was delivered, yet the cost could never be undone. In the solitude of his prison cell, Daniel finally dropped the last mask. Sitting in the shadows, half his face swallowed by darkness, he whispered to no one, "It could have been perfect." But perfection had turned to damnation, and the walls of his cell would be his only legacy.